Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lillian Lodge Copenhaver, Executive Director of the Copenhaver Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication at Florida International University. I am pleased to welcome you to the Virgil and Joann Smith Thought Leaders Forum for Women's History Month. Communication Today. Are we getting the whole story? The presentation today is one of the signature programs of the Copenhaver Center in support of its mission to empower young women in order to develop visionaries and leaders who can make a difference in their communities and in their professions. Today, we are excited to have with us a speaker who will discuss a topic of critical interest to all of us. We are constantly bombarded with information from numerous channels of communication. But how do we know that we are getting all of the information that we need so we can arrive at an informed decision about any topic or idea? And how can we, as communicators, be sure that we are getting all of the information that we need when we put messages out there? I know that you will all have lots of questions about the topic, and we will take your questions following our keynote presentation. Please type them in the chat room. Our convener this afternoon is Erika Gonzalez, co-anchor of the CBS News Miami Morning Edition team. Prior to her recent return to South Florida, she spent 9 years at KDVR and KWGN-TV in Denver, where she most recently served as evening anchor. Prior to going to Denver, she served as a reporter for WBRC-TV in Birmingham, Alabama, and as reporter and traffic anchor at WMBF-TV in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Gonzalez started her career as a public relations professional in her hometown of Miami before moving to television as an assignment editor for CBS News Miami. Gonzalez, a Miami native and a graduate of Florida International University, earned a bachelor's degree in communications and psychology and is a first-generation daughter of Cuban and Guatemalan immigrants. Our keynote speaker this afternoon is Kelley Benham French, narrative accountability editor at the Washington Post. Described by the Post as a gifted journalist who has helped drive distinctive journalism in newsrooms across the country, she joined their investigations unit last September. French oversees teams with the mission of harnessing immersive reporting, rigorous investigative work, and exceptional writing to produce stories that hold powerful forces accountable on matters of urgent national interest. She also serves as a resource for journalism in the newsroom as a coach, mentor, sounding board, and collaborator. Our speaker served as senior editor for storytelling at the Dallas Morning News, where she edited signature narratives about topics such as the mass shooting at an outlet mall in Allen, Texas, and led an ambitious and penetrating project, Deadly Fake, 30 Days Inside Fentanyl's Grip on North Texas, that engaged more than 30 journalists to tell 50 stories in a single month. French also served as a professor of practice in journalism at the Media School at Indiana University and 3 years as senior editor for narratives and special projects at USA Today, anchored in the investigative team. She edited and co-wrote an illuminating series exploring the first enslaved Africans brought to Virginia, as well as the gripping account of an Afghan journalist's escape from Kabul as the Taliban seized control of the country. Prior to USA Today, she edited narrative and investigative projects with the Oregonian, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, the Tampa Bay Times, and other outlets. One such project led to a Pulitzer finalist in local reporting and winner of the Best American Newspaper Narrative Competition, the Kavli Science Medal, Scripps Howard National Headliner, and DART Awards, among others. From 2002 to 2012, French was enterprise editor and writer at the Tampa Bay Times, where she was a Pulitzer finalist in feature writing for Never Let Go, the story of the extremely premature birth of her daughter, Juniper. At the Times, she edited two stories that were Pulitzer finalists: Winter's Tale, the account of a baby dolphin with a prosthetic tail, and For Their Own Good, a revealing exploration of decades of abuse at a boys' reform school. Our keynoter is an alum of the Philip Merrill School of Journalism at the University of Maryland and has taught narrative journalism in 6 countries and 14 states. I am pleased to present Kelley Benham French.
Wow, that was a lot. Thank you so much.
A lot.
I'm also kind of I spent some time at FIU as well, which was a really great time in my life. And I want to thank you, Dr. Copenhaver, for that and for that great introduction and for having me here today. I'm a pretty casual person, so I'm just gonna offer a few thoughts, and then what I'm really looking forward to is getting into the conversation because I want to know what y'all want to know about. Um, I got out of the classroom in September, um, after teaching at Indiana University for a decade, and so this is my first time back, so that's kind of fun. But I don't have to do any grades or feedback, which is amazing. Um, so that's liberating as well. Um, so when I was thinking about this topic, are we getting the whole story? That's a little bit of an intimidating question. I mean, probably not is my gut level right answer, right? Like, how could we be? Even on matters that I'm deeply, deeply interested in. And you all know how this goes. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And it just starts to feel like this bottomless journey. But that's what life is, right? Like it's discovery. And it's not about the final product. It's about the steps that you put in, the effort that you put in to getting there. And that's what journalism is to me. Like I teach journalism and writing and reporting as process, not a final product. Um, and if we do the right things to the best of our ability with some discipline, then good things are going to happen. And that's all we can control. So I guess when I think about, are we getting the whole story? I think, well, that's kind of up to us, isn't it? I mean, what are you feeding your mind? Last week I was doom scrolling as I'm wont to do on my phone, and I mean like 2 hours went by. That can happen so easily. And a video came across my Instagram, and it said tens of NYPD officers, which by the way, that's a redundancy there. NYPD police officers, right? It repeats police, which that just pissed me off as a journalist. But anyway, tens of NYPD police officers are called against a student sit-in at Columbia's Bernard College who are calling for food and water to enter into Gaza. And like that's some rage bait right there. Um, I want people in Gaza to have water. And I generally don't like it when cops are arresting college students. We went through a bout of that at Indiana University, and it was scary and it sucked. Um, but, you know, I gotta ask, like, okay, what's the source? So, what are other people saying about this? So I go in my little Google machine, the Googler, and go to some sources that I believe to be reputable. And the headlines were more along the lines of police responding to bomb threat, clear protesters occupying this Columbia building. Well, I don't like when people get blown to bits by bombs either, right? So the the vertical video that just popped up in my feed was shared by a group that was actually a clothing company founded to raise funds for Palestinian American refugees, and they've donated $1 million to Palestine over the years, and great for them. Um, but that's not a good news source, right? So already like I'm letting stuff in kind of irresponsibly through my feed if I don't check it. And I'm a person who believes really strongly in this stuff, and I don't usually fall for stuff like that. Um, and it's just important to know that that's not journalism, right? Like Wear the Piece is a clothing company, they're not journalists. So I guess if whatever the whole story is, or whatever part of the story it is, if it's coming to you in a vertical video via an algorithm, then no, you're not getting it. But not because people aren't trying to deliver it to you. I mean, there are people, thousands of people that are literally risking their lives to make it available. So I guess, I'll just offer a couple of thoughts and y'all can take what you want from it. But, one is I think you really get what you pay for. Real journalism is exceptionally time intensive and expensive. I have a reporter on my team who just finished a 2-year project with another reporter, investigating police officers who rape children in the course of their work. It's not just expensive to pay those people to do that kind of work, but it's expensive to pay the lawyers to review the work, the visual journalists to go, take the pictures, the data journalists to like help crunch the numbers, the people who sue to get records. Um, and it's years of their time. And it's the emotional toll that it takes is overwhelming. And, it will take them probably most of the rest of this year just to like kind of return to normal from that. Um, I've got a reporter who's not much older than any of you all who just started her third stint in Ukraine. And for her to tell stories from the front lines there requires not just that we get her to Ukraine, but that we give her hostile environment training, they call it. Like she's got to learn what to do if she's like tied to a tree and blindfolded. Um, she's got to travel with translators and a security team and logistics people, and she's got to be in an armored car, and she's got to have a bulletproof vest, and she's, all this stuff. And, if all that stuff takes money, and yet even people that are really close to me, like if they see something shared online, they'll hit that paywall and they'll say, well, I'm not paying for that. And it's like, okay, but then don't complain. Don't complain that if you're not getting the whole story or whatever, because if you're not paying for it, then it's just coming to you through a crappy filter. So in addition to, my local newspaper, and the paper in my closest big city and the two nonprofits that have sprung up there, um, and 3 national papers and 3 magazines, I also subscribe to publications that are a bit outside of my political leaning, let's say. And that's kind of a thing that I believe in, is that not only do you get what you pay for, but you really get what you seek, right? So are you only seeking news or commentary from sources that you feel comfortable with, that you feel like you probably agree with? If so, then no, you're not getting the real story. So, the algorithms are designed to keep you in an echo chamber and to sort of maximize division. In fact, a lot of that stuff is put there literally by foreign actors, like foreign governments and teenagers in their basement that think they can make a buck off of your outrage. And stories have been done like tracing these things back to their source, where reporters have gone to like find the kid in the basement and talk to them. Um, but you have to really think hard about what you're seeking. Um, so I keep people in my feeds that piss me off. Now, there's some people you just gotta let go. Okay, like those people. I've cut a few loose myself. You can't save them all. But if you've got somebody that you know or believe to be like a thoughtful, well-meaning person, who's willing to engage and have a conversation, I say keep them in your feed. And not only keep them in your feed, but pick up the phone and call and check on them. I do this. Um, when I think I know what I'm doing regarding a story, I pick up the phone and I call some people that are going to tell me why I'm wrong before I write the story. Because why would I wait to get the phone call after it runs? So, during the last election, it was really hard for a lot of people. Um, and the election before that was really hard for a lot of people. And the election before that was really hard for a lot of people. And my reaction to that as I've kind of gotten older has evolved a lot. And to where this most recent one I posted, no matter what you're feeling today, if you want to talk about it, my phone lines are open. And you wouldn't believe the flood of responses I got from people I know who are like, I didn't tell my husband who I voted for, but can we talk about it? It's like, yeah, let's talk about it. And I ended up having like 3-hour conversations with one person after another, after another, after another, because people are just like really feeling unsafe about what is really the most central core of our democracy, which is like we should be able to talk about shit. Um, so that's made me a better person. I can only speak for me, but it's broadened me. It hasn't like, I haven't joined any cults or like gotten any new tattoos or like, moved into a commune or anything, but like it it has really helped me um be aware of my own biases and see things from another point of view. And it's made me more conscious about where I seek out information. And some of my sources have come from some of those conversations. I've asked people like, where do you get your news? And there's some places that I know are just horrific and I'm not going to go there, but I found some great news sources that have become like really important to me that I now pay money and subscribe to. Um, so the odds are, no matter what you think about things, that half the country feels differently from you. And that's allowed. Not only is it allowed, it's absolutely essential. So, you know, are you curious about the views of people that don't agree with you? And have you asked anybody about it? How many whole books have you read in the last year that were not assigned? And like, do you know who your neighbors are? Do you know who they voted for? Or do you know the names of their kids? Or do you know what they're scared of? Or do you know, what they're proud of? Like, or are you contributing kind of to your own echo chamber? Because there's so much in this environment that we cannot control. Every day is like you open your feed and it's like a primal scream and it's like, ah, and I get it. But there are things that you can control and that's very close to home. And I think those connections that we make and that we nurture every day really matter. And those were some of the first things that people kind of gave up on. Um, so I guess you get what you pay for, you get what you seek, but you kind of get what you're willing to hear. And a lot of people are just not willing or able anymore to listen. Listening is really hard. It sounds like it would be easy because you just sit there and don't talk, but that's not it. Listening is a very active and very difficult process that as a journalist and as a human, you have to train yourself to do. And most people don't ever learn to listen unless they spend extensive time in marriage counseling. And it can take a few rounds, let me tell you from personal experience. You have to learn to actively listen to somebody. And that's really hard because it means squelching every impulse that you have in your mind, heart, spirit to say, like, oh, I hear that you're angry and it's because X. Does that sound right? And if you can't, if you can't do that, no, you're not getting the whole story. You're just not. Um, so, are you going around with like pods in your ear the whole time? And like, what are you channeling into your brain pan. There was a point in my life, and it was right around college. It was, well, it was earlier than college, but where I realized my parents didn't know everything. And that's like a really powerful moment. And most of us remember that moment in our lives. It's like when you're two, you learn that you have the power to say no. So you just go around going, no, 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 and like biting people. Well, there's kind of an intellectual equivalent of that, I think, when you realize your parents don't know everything. And so you kind of go around like, oh my God. And suddenly like your world just opens up. And that honestly is one of the things that drove me into journalism because I was like, wow, there's this world out there. It's so different from what I grew up in. Um, but what I really did was I just sort of cast myself from one echo chamber into another for a little bit. And it's only that I've like started to get like gray hair and wrinkles, and my kids are like, mouthing off to me, and I have a mortgage and, a life, and my parents have gotten really old, and like I've had to take care of them, and like everything comes around. And sorry to be like old wise lady at the end of the road, but um I kind of realized, oh, like my parents knew some stuff and I missed it. I missed a lot because I thought I was so sure that I was right about stuff. So now the only thing that I'm sure about is that I don't know enough about anything, and that's how I approach everything. Um, there's always nuance. There's always a way to understand somebody better and to draw closer to somebody and to at least demonstrate not just your willingness, but your absolute determination to learn, um, to be curious, and, to channel that into your life and your work, and to invite people whose behavior is puzzling to you into an opportunity to talk about it. In journalism education these days, I think, doesn't spend enough time talking about these basic things. We're so enamored of our toys, If you go to any journalism school, they're going to take you around and they'll show you the TV studio and the cameras and the sound booths and the virtual reality studio. And like, I advise you to be extremely suspicious of all of it because all of it will change. You can learn all the software you want, and in 5 years, you'll be doing something different. But the tool that you really need to be thinking about is your brain. I mean, it's like, can you listen to people? Can you think critically? Can you express yourself? Can you write? That's the equipment that you need to lean on, to have not just a career, but just a life. Journalism is, uh, it's not a telling business. We don't go around and tell people what to think or tell people what's happening. Journalism is, it's a listening business. Um, and it takes a lot, a lot, a lot of work. As does democracy, as does anything, any single thing in life that is worth doing at all, takes a lot of work. And I'll just open it up to questions.
All right, so I guess we'll get started here. Kelley, thank you so much. I can only speak for myself, but huge motivation, huge inspiration, and an excellent reminder of the things that we need to make a priority as journalists. But we'll go ahead and get started with the questions here. We have a question now from Samantha, and she says, as an inspiring editor, I want to know, what do you see as the most important thing that you have to do as an accountability editor?
Oh gosh, that's a big one. Um, ooh, editors do a lot of different things, and there are a lot of different kinds of editors, right? So editors are like psychologists, and they're grammar Nazis, and they're punctuation police, and they uphold ethical standards, and they have to know stuff about the law, and like they have to like talk people off a psychological ledge a lot. There's all these things that we do. So what's the most important? I think it's really like giving a damn, like really being the person in the room who cares the most. Like, you have to absolutely care about something that is bigger than yourself, bigger than your team, bigger than anybody in the room, and you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to uphold that thing. You have to have like a little bit of a sort of holy zeal about you, right? But it's it's for this, you have to really believe it matters. And just be unwilling to compromise or be sloppy, even on stuff that doesn't seem like it matters, because it all matters.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Aaron this time. What are your thoughts on the exodus of journalists from legacy media and the proliferation of alternative news outlets on apps like Substack?
Okay, well, I mean, I think what's happened with legacy media, it's a crisis. Like in that, not so much like the New York Times. I think they're doing great. Um, but my local paper has shrunk. Your local paper, if it still exists, has shrunk. There are news deserts that have, all over the country, and that is absolutely critical for democracy because, if people can't access real information about what's going on, then they can't function. They don't know where their money's going. There's all kinds of room for corruption. There's also all kinds of room for conspiracy theories to blossom. All of that bad. Um, and there are lots of nonprofit and independent news organizations popping up, many of them doing really great work. But there are still probably many fewer reporters on the street. And that's the metric that I think about. It's like how many people are out doing the work? How many city councils and school boards and zoning commissions and planning boards don't have a reporter in there? Um, that stuff really, really matters. Now, there are fewer jobs, and that's a key reason that journalists leave. Journalists leave for other reasons too. Most of the ones that I know that have left for more money. I mean, hey, we got to make a living. And while people that operate at a really high level make great money in this business, it can be hard um, at a smaller place. I don't know. Everybody's got their own thing about Substack. For me, like I went through my Substack phase and I'm coming out of it. Like I've canceled most of my subscriptions. I don't know about y'all. It's hard, right? There's not that many people that I just as one voice that I want to pay monthly for. Like I feel much better served by my legacy subscriptions right now because I feel like I get a lot more bang for my buck, but that's an individual decision. Um, I still have like three or four people that I follow on Substack, but and it's always, man, it's always friends too. It's like, oh, I got a Substack now, and so you want to support them, but then you realize you're paying for like 15 Substacks, and nobody can do that. Um, so I think everything cycles around. It's like I could just foresee, I can envision the future where like all the Substack people get together and make their own publication, and we just pay for that, and then we're back where we started. I don't know. Um, I wish, I had the magic answer. But I know part of the problem is people not wanting to pay for news and people being content with 15 seconds of whatever comes across their TikTok. And so I think some of that responsibility again lies with us. Like, what do we put up with? And what do we demand?
Okay, now we have a question from Denise, and she's asking, what role does data analysis and document research play in your accountability reporting process?
Oh, it's massive. We have a incredibly gifted data team that partners with us on almost everything, honestly. At the Washington Post, there's an investigative department that has three teams. There's like a long-term team and there's a rapid team. that says, oh, like this bridge collapsed, can we figure out why? Or like, oh, the plane just fell in this river, can we figure out why? And then there's my team, which is narrative accountability, which is this kind of a storytelling team. Like we'll go and immerse ourselves physically in a place and document what's happening. And so these teams all work together, but there's also investigative reporters all over the other parts of the room. They're in sports, they're in business, they're in local, they're everywhere. And so while we have a data team, almost every journalist at the Post also has some data skills and can do like pretty basic work without help. But if they need or want help, help is available. So from my point of view, I tend to use data to tell me where to go. It doesn't replace in-person reporting, but it might help me find the area in the country that's feeling the most pressure at a particular moment for a particular reason. Um, like if I want to go talk to somebody about maternal fetal deaths or something, I don't know, then I'm going to start with data to try to figure out like where proportionally the most deaths are. And then I'm going to call people there and a bunch of experts. I'm going to talk to like 50, 70 people before, and then I'm going to call like a dozen, 2 dozen people that might be a potential source before I pick one and, get on a plane. That's how that works. Now, there are other people that just interview the data and report on it. Like, polls say this. Here you go. I guess journalism, though, needs all kinds. I think a lot of people get out of journalism because they think it's all knocking on the door of the like shooting victim's mother. Um, it's so much bigger than that. And there are places for every type of person. We've got places for um, the lawyers, we've got places for the biology majors, we've got places for the neuroscientists, the geologists, like we've got room for all of you. We've got a whole the investigative team has a whole visual forensics unit. Um, it's unbelievable. Game designers, we've got a lot of game designers in journalism. They make like interactive experiences. So a lot of people, I think, make decisions or assumptions about journalism without even really exploring what it is.
I have a question that I think kind of pairs well with what you were just discussing, and it kind of has to do with the point that you made earlier. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on potentially being more transparent when it comes to legacy media. We'll use the Post as an example. You guys have all these resources and all these methods and strategies to come up with a single story or a series on a topic. And there's so much that goes into it. What are your thoughts on being transparent about that? Because I, uh, you know, I could make the assumption that the majority of the people who are consuming that media or not, don't know what it
I
takes
don't.
to put together a well-written, documented story. So I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on being more transparent? Has the Post made an effort to be more transparent about, more open about that?
I can't really speak for the Post because I haven't really been there that long. I mean, I've been a consumer of it. Um, and I don't want to like misrepresent whatever they may be doing, but I can tell you that as long as I've been in journalism, which is okay, I'm 50, so like 25 years, there's been a constant push for more transparency. So when I started, we didn't used to have those like boxes at the end of a story that's like how it was reported. Now we do that for every story just about like this story was reported by these 14 people who spent 9 months analyzing 12,000 pages of documents and filed 3 lawsuits, reported from 7 states. Like I just read a story this morning from the New York Times. It was an unbelievably long story. It was like basically a small book. Um, about um, soldiers who from the Russian army who have defected. And it's, this reporter spent a year and a half, if I'm getting this right, reporting from 8 different countries on 4 continents. Like, holy crap. That information is right there if you're actually consuming the original product from the New York Times or from the Washington Post. But if you're watching somebody's little like garbage feed that they made on TikTok or whatever, you're probably not getting that. A lot of times people just rip off our work and then go comment about it, and that's all you get, is somebody misrepresenting something, right? So you have to kind of trace back to the source, but we've been talking more about just my group of people that I know, about, should reporters be on camera more? Like that's been a conversation since I was in grad school. Is it good for you as a viewer, reader, consumer, like to get to know some of our journalists? Like, is that helpful or not? One of my reporters was doing a fact check on a story, and I was just walking by, and she had a spreadsheet up, and it was like tens of thousands of lines. And each one would be like a word or phrase or fact or detail in a story linked to every single source. So maybe for like one fact, there would be like 5 different things linked, like original documents. And I was like, we should just make a video of this. We should just make a vertical video of this. Like people don't know that this takes you 2 weeks just to do this, and that you call every single person and you like painstakingly go through all of this. People have no idea. So I do think it's really important. I think a lot of effort has been made, and more, there's a lot more to do.
Okay, thank you for answering that. Let's get a question now from Justine. This is what she had to say. I'm definitely for open discussions on difficult/challenging topics. I believe that these conversations allow us to think more critically and opens us to different perspectives. I feel the challenge lies in who you discuss these topics with and their competence to comprehend different points of views. Do you suggest a particular strategy to encourage having these conversations?
It's hard, right? I mean, we all know this. We all know people that are just like not living in the real world. And like, that's what I'm saying. Like, and on both sides, like we know people that you can't talk to. But it's just a big world too. So, um, I think you can kind of tell, like, okay, so like I have a relative who I don't agree on any topic with, but I know he works really hard to be a good person. And I know where he's coming from. Like I know him, you know? And I've learned a lot from him. Um, Sometimes it's just as simple as going to visit, like um walk around in somebody's shoes. So I'll give you an example. I took my daughter, she goes to a school, it's like a charter school. It's a small school. Um, and we're in a college town. So I'd say our town has a pretty like liberal bent, right? Like I worry a little bit if I'm seen in the Chick-fil-A line because somebody might say something to me. Um, and so I took my daughter on a road trip to see one of my relatives, and we went to a basketball game, women's high school basketball game, because there's nothing else to do there. And it was like the Ladybugs playing the Indians or something. And my daughter was like, Indians? That's racist. You can't call your sports team Indians. I learned that at school. And I was like, okay, well, like, good for you for thinking about other perspectives and like how that might come across or whatever. But like, I got to tell you, like, we're in Eastern Oklahoma right now. You're like sitting in the middle of the Choctaw Reservation. Like, and I think if it was a problem, they would decide it was a problem, right? Like, I don't think 13-year-old girl from Indiana gets to come in here and decide it's a problem. So maybe we should just like watch the game, get some popcorn, right? Like, but she's got to see different perspectives, you know? I think travel really matters, right? And not just travel to like all-inclusive resorts and beaches, right? But like travel in our own country, in your own state. I mean, you can be in Florida, but good Lord, have you ever been to Micanopy or like Apalachicola, or like, you know, how deep into your state have you gone? Like, if you're sticking to the coasts, you're getting a different perspective. And they're really, really great stories too. That's the other thing about news deserts. We've lost a lot, but it also means that if you go places and report, the treasures that await you, incredible. You can't miss. Just shooting in a barrel.
Before we move on to the next question, I'm super curious as to how you knew those places in Florida.
I grew up in Clearwater.
Okay, gotcha. That helps. Clear water, so beautiful.
I went to the
All right.
University of Florida.
All right, fantastic. So we have a question from Mayra. How do you encourage your reporters to dig deep and apply critical thinking to their process?
I mean, my reporters are, well, they don't belong to me, but you know, they're the best in the world, I think. Um, and so like we kind of help each other. And they're already working really hard at that. They're also like they're a diverse group, which is helpful. We're in a room that values diversity, so there are different perspectives in the room. Um, I will say though, like I have worked with many, many, many college journalists, hundreds of them. Um, I've worked with hundreds of journalists younger than 27, let's say. And I have had to really push people outside of their comfort zones at times in different directions. So, you know, in my reporting assignments when I was a professor, I would just demand it. I would just say, "Hey, you can't report on college students. End of story." How hard is that? But you can self-impose that too. I mean, you can just decide like I'm only going to report on people over the age of 65 for the next 6 months. You'll be a smarter person at the end of those months if you do that. I would sometimes drop little pieces of paper in a jar, and it would if like and it would say, you know, one would be like the word pressure, you know, or the word faith. Another might be a street beginning with the letter K. Another might be someone who owns a gun. Another might be you know, somebody of a different race than you. Like whatever doesn't matter. Whatever the parameters are, you could just make them up. But when I gave students those boundaries and I said, okay, you have to go find a story here, the stories were always better. And it didn't matter how arbitrary I made it. It could be like, you have to find a person with green eyes and a buck teeth. It doesn't matter. There are many versions of this exercise. You know, there's one editor who would, back when they had physical phone books, which you've probably never seen in your life, but there used to be a book that was full of people's names and phone numbers. He would just take a hammer and nail and drive it in the phone book, open it up, and say, that's who you're going to write about. Good luck. And that's a great way to find a story. You'll find something, right? The crime is not to leave your house, right? And it's to just look right around you at the things that are obvious to you. So, you know, one is to get a go to the bus station and just get on one. Get on a bus. Get off 2 or 3 stops later and look around. You'll find something.
All right, we have a question from Tessie. What role does audience feedback or engagement play in shaping your accountability coverage?
Well, that's really interesting. That's another thing that really evolves with the times. Like, how do we deal with audience feedback and how do we deal with comments and stuff like that? Because you've got in your comments section, and again, I'm not speaking for an institution here, I'm just telling you my experience. In your comment section, you can have some bad actors in there. You can have trolls. You can also have people that are really thoughtful and engaged. And so I think the news organizations have gotten better about how they handle their comment section. But I will say that one of the great gifts of the internet age is the call out, is like that you can say, hey, we're interested in this thing. Have you had this experience? If so, here's our number. Um, and just letting people know how they can get hold of a journalist, um, that's gotten the world has kind of opened up there. The fact that you can find a Reddit thread for pretty much anything you might ever be interested in, and like there's a whole bucket full of sources right there. Like you still got to sort through them. Um, that you can you can have a conversation with your readers, right? You can get to know them and you can, and I like to hear from people before publishing rather than after, if at all possible. I don't want to ever be surprised. Like if there's going to be an angry ex-wife or something, I want to know about it and I want to talk to them first, right? So I'm always thinking like who's going to be mad about this and have we called them? Um, but inevitably, you'll learn something new that'll lead you on to the next story and the next and the next. And then your body of work like exists and gets passed around in these groups and in these communities, and you kind of can develop a little bit of expertise in an area. And that's when that's really becomes a superpower because I think one of the problems with all of the great technology that we have, all of the great storytelling tools that we have, is that in the beginning, early career, people feel a lot of pressure to learn to do it all. Like we have to do data, we have to do audio, we have to do video. And that just kind of, turns you into a generalist who's not really great at any one thing. And so I kind of encourage people at all stages of their career to always be kind of working on being an expert at something, some craft thing. For me, it's writing, right? And then some content area, right? Like I have just through my life, I've developed some knowledge in like bioethics and medicine and because of stuff with my daughter and things I've written about. Um, I'm really interested in stories, like offbeat stuff. So, but I work with a guy who's been writing about school shootings for like 7 years. Nobody knows more about that than him in the country. So always be trying to be the best at something. Because the media environment is big enough that whatever your thing is, there's a place for you. Like there's gonna be like if you're into like, I don't know, um, tandem surfboarding. I don't know, I just made that up. I don't think that exists. But if that's your thing, there's probably like a magazine for that online somewhere. And they're just waiting for your call.
I'm glad my husband isn't listening to this conversation. He'd be like, "What? I need to try
I don't
that."
know, I just made that up.
All right, we have a question now from Yinting. And I believe what she's trying to ask is essentially, what would you say about using short videos more effectively as a news resource, considering that it's one of the major places where people, especially young adults, get their news?
Yeah, I mean everyone's doing that more and more and more. And like that's great. Like we need to be reaching out to different audiences and meeting them where they are. Um but if you're getting all of your news through short video, you're not getting a very deep picture of the world. It's just not possible.
Um, I'm going to add just one question before we get to our final question, just because today the topic is, are we getting the whole story? I'm curious as to, as an editor, when do you know, or when do you tend to feel like you have the whole story and you're now ready to publish?
Where you start to get diminishing returns in your reporting. I mean, you probably never run out of new things, but when phone call after phone call after phone call fails to surprise you in any way, you're probably getting there. And so when we're embarking on a story, surprise is something that I really seek. Like if I already know what the story is going to say, or I could feel like I could write it in my head, then we probably shouldn't be doing it. And it's definitely not investigative, right? Both investigative journalism and narrative journalism, which are the two crafts that I practice, should lead you someplace a little bit unexpected. There should be some kind of reveal or surprise. Um, and we tend to report for a very long time. Like it can be years. It's not always. Sometimes it's an afternoon. Um, but when you get to the place of diminishing returns, that's when you're done.
Why is it important to increase female experts and sources in telling stories?
Mm. I mean, I think it's important to increase diversity in all kinds of experts and stories. Because we just can't imagine another point of view, like unless we work at it to get inside of it. So um I mean, absolutely female experts, but I would say experts of all kinds, and that just and not experts with titles of all kinds, right? Like I think we are much too interested in people with long titles and as experts. Maybe your climate change expert is the Eskimo hunter who can tell you what's happened to the ice over the course of his life. Maybe he's got to fish from farther out or closer in, or however that works. Like who are your experts? Are they people with degrees? That's important, and I wouldn't skip them. But can they lead you to people that are having a lived experience that can take you inside of a world? That's what I look for. And uh, the experience of women is typically quite rich and messy. I can just speak from my life. Like, I'm not wearing makeup right now because I ran in here from like multiple crises, both professional and personal, because I have 3 kids that all have special needs, right? And I have like multiple things going on all the time. And for whatever reason, all the women in my life are living the same story. So I think we need to think really broadly about what our concept of diversity is. Sometimes it's like, you know, just somebody from a different socioeconomic place in life. I think we overlook that one a lot. So it depends on what the story is, but
I love that. I feel like any professional that I've ever respected, they say surround yourself with, yeah, like diversity of experience.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think that that definitely tends to help the end product always. We have a really important question. This one's coming to us from Elizabeth. How can we convince young folks that they need the whole story or should be seeking it out? I would add.
Man, I spent 10 years of my life trying, and I don't know that I was very successful, and ultimately decided that I really think it's a really critical time in our country, and it was important for me to be doing journalism the best that I could. I think people kind of figure it out as they become more invested in the world, as they have kids, as they buy houses, as they um, lose people. Every single thing that happens to you in your life, good or bad, makes you a better, more interesting, more invested person. Um, but it really does bother me how many of my students and young people that I've worked with were so sure so sure of what they knew. And the longer I do this, the more sure I am that I don't know anything. I know nothing. And that's just how I try to approach every situation.
Yeah, beautifully said. I think we're just about ready to wrap up. Kelley, I was just wondering if you had any maybe final words for our audience here they want to make sure we take away.
Um, I mean, I think if you're in the business of communication, whether it's journalism or whatever, I mean, I would encourage you to take a minute and think about what that means. It's a real responsibility, I think, to it's, you know, what you have to say really matters. And I think we think a lot about how to say things and how to look when we're saying things and on what platform to say things. And we don't spend enough time thinking about what we're saying and where it's coming from. And so the more that you can do to just like live a rich life, like take some risks in your life, you know, like if there's a bus leaving town for the weekend, get on it, like say yes to things, challenge yourself, let yourself be kind of kicked around by life a little bit. It'll and when those things happen to you, inevitably they will, whether you want it or not. Just understand that like a certain amount of that has to happen for you to develop like empathy and perspective and just embrace it and enjoy it.
Okay, great. Kelley, thank you so much. So beautifully said. I can only speak for myself, but I really enjoyed our conversation here. And I know I'm walking away with things that I've learned. And like I said earlier, just really, really important reminders as to why it is that we do what we do. So Kelley, thank you so much to everybody who attended this today. Thank you so much to the Copenhaver Center and to Dr. Copenhaver. Thank you so much for having us here today. And I hope that everybody had a lovely afternoon. Thank you.